to me, an artist is like an interpreter.
Yeah.
I see something, but I know what needs to be there, what doesn't need to be there, how to make that focal point a focal
Right.
point where it says, okay,
Right.
it makes, because you got the front of the train fairly well detailed, and
Yes.
it kind of pops and jumps at you, where the rest of the train, even
Really
though it's
soft.
not, it's soft, but it doesn't necessarily apply in my head that it matters. It's still
Yeah.
great. It's still,
Yeah.
I consider it, it's got detail. I consider
Yeah.
it to be there, even though it's not. Same with your
Yeah.
trees. You're talking about all the detail that the photo came out with, all the trees and all the branches and everything.
Yeah.
And it's like, you just fluffed them to the point where it says,
Yep.
oh, it's all it needs. And
Yeah.
yeah, my mind says, oh, she got every branch right.
Exactly. And this is new for me, by the way. Like
Okay.
this is within the past few years that I figured out, wait, I don't have to paint everything in the photo. That
Right.
doesn't make me
Yeah.
a bad artist if I
Yeah.
don't do everything exactly as the photo.
Exactly.
Like, so I've actually got another train painting, and you could probably actually potentially compare the two side by side. It's called The Town That's Silver Built. And it's the same Ontario Northland train with a front, and it's coming into a train station. And I painted that in 2017. And that was very much in my photocopying era.
Yeah. Yep.
Where I didn't really use a limited palette. So I've got way more colors going on. Everything is super sharp. So because I was copying the photos have
Mhm.
sharp lines, especially
Right.
if they've got a long depth of field. So everything was sharp. Everything in the background was sharp. The roofs are sharp. Like the trains way in the background that with my eyes would be super blurry. I made them so sharp. And so
Exactly.
even though
Exactly.
people like that painting, I look back on that. And this is probably what you were saying too, in terms of how you make these past mistakes and you think, oh gosh, I don't want to go there again. Even though that painting was a success in the sense that people really liked it and, it found a home.
Mhm.
I look back on it and I think, okay, I can see the growth here between these two paintings.
And that is interesting, because as far as your interpretation of it's called The Spirit of the North. It's a 12 by 16 oil on canvas.
That one's the newer one. And then the older one is
The older
called,
one.
yeah, it's called The Town That Silver Built. And it was massive. It took
It
me
was
months and months and months. I want to say it was like 6 months of on and off work.
interesting.
Yeah.
I want to see that and get that
Yeah.
on here too. But on The Spirit of the North, the thing that really evokes to me on this is that you could take pigment, paint, and put it on, interpret the reference in such a way that the pigment can get on to where what you've talked about, you lose the detail, but you don't lose the whole piece. It is all part of the piece. And you cannot sit here and critique saying, well, she didn't get that little rail that was on the back end
Yeah.
completely correct, which maybe this other one that you talked about that you did earlier, or very early on, that
Yeah.
it was like this. But this shows to me the dynamics of your painting. It just comes out so well that
Hmm.
I think I could not even get it this good, because of the fact that you recognize the pieces that should be painted a certain way, should be dulled, should be saturated, and then other ways that should be detailed, that should be not. And I think that's the art of being a painter.
Yeah. And that comes with practice.
Yeah.
And I have to say, like, I really studied last year, actually, one of your previous guests, John Potoshnik. And like,
Mm.
I've never met him, but I have looked at his work as such a shining example
Hmm.
of how you can take limited palettes
Hmm.
and these scenes that would otherwise seem mundane,
Right.
and through intentional painterliness, like I studied the heck out of his work, and like I'm looking at how he does like maybe 3 or 4 branches for a tree,
Right.
but you see like the tree, it's the tree.
Right.
Like adding more to that tree would not add more to the painting itself. It's
Hmm.
almost like he knows exactly when each part of his composition has hit that point where more would take away, if that makes sense. And
The
he's such a
manipul
master of it.
right, the manipulation of his color.
Yeah.
He brought a couple things to the table. His background was illustrator,
Right.
and that's one thing that made his hometown paintings and stuff like that just really pop. But
Yeah.
it's his color manipulation,
Yeah.
and I see the same thing in you. It's the way that you use that color to say, okay, the front of the train is going to be the only thing that's going to really pop, and that's going to be with the color as well as with the detail, because it's not just detail. You could have a detail on a caboose, but the
Yeah.
color could be so faded and so dull that it doesn't matter. I mean, it
Yeah.
just wouldn't look good. But you knew where to put these two pieces, and that's where these artists who are coming up in the ranks and who are listening to this, who are just trying to learn, it does take some knowledge and practice, and it is a process. It is something that is not just, oh, I'll just do this here now and don't worry about it. Marianne, I'm sure, as well as the others, have a methodology that they follow. And it's like, we do this at the start, we do this at the very beginning, we do this while we're midway into it, and then we do this toward the end, and we do it. And they don't mix those up. It's pretty much a linear way of painting. And that's where I'm trying to get to, is that in order to do 15 hours or longer, they are linearly painting a process. And if
Yeah.
you don't get that process down, in other words, if you start with the end process at the beginning and the beginning process at the end, you're not going to get there. You've got
Yeah.
to learn it from the point of, what do I do first? What do I do second? What do I do third? And John goes down the same freaking road. I mean, he
Mhm.
has his layers that he puts in, and then he brings them out. So anybody who tells you through most of these videos is saying, okay, you get your darks and your shapes and your dark shapes and your dark objects done first, and then you go into your lights. I mean, yeah, somebody can tell you that, but there are variations of that process that you also have to know in
Mhm.
order to get to that light area. And that's sometimes not even told to you. And it's
Yeah.
like, okay, I got my dark object here, I got my light object here, and I could put a few values within that dark object, and then I go, why aren't these kind of coming together? And why is this dark one the highlight or the focus of my painting and not the light one, which is where it should be? So
Mhm.
it is a learned thing, and it's amazing. She said that on the train, that it's taken you've gotten into a 2-year mode of just learning this, get the leaves off the track, and it's better with just the snow. I
Yeah.
mean, that's something that, if you didn't know about that, people would say, okay, the noise is fine, let's put more noise on it and no big deal. But the painting doesn't look as good as Marianne's. What did I do wrong? Kind of.
Yeah. I think I think it's as I learn it, I'm trying to think of how to phrase this. I think when I started, and even now, I had a lot of imposter syndrome where it was
Mm,
like, oh, I'm cheating if I do it this way. Like, I'm
mm,
cheating if I don't give every single detail in the photo. That means I'm a
right.
bad artist because, I don't think I want to add it in. So I'm cheating by not putting it in. And it's taken a lot of time for me to come to terms with the fact that, you know, art is so much more than, well, it's very similar to a photo, but often, and you probably find this too, our reference photos are taken in passing, and the
Mhm.
reference photos are taken without necessarily as much thought to composition. Like the real
Mhm.
photographers do
Mhm.
this. But
Mhm.
for someone like me, I'm just snapping a shot, or someone wants
Right.
to, something like that. You don't necessarily think about all of that. And so it's taken a long time for me to understand that the interpretation piece is actually a huge component of my job. And deciding what to keep, what to leave, where to adjust my colors, where to make
that
sharp.
that right there really hits the nail on the head. It's you've got a photo in front of you. What do you take out and what do you leave in?
Yeah.
And a good artist such as John
Yeah.
knows exactly what to take out and what to leave. Don't paint this, even though it's in the photo. And I
Yeah.
get you the imposter syndrome. I'm from similar to that. I'm the tech syndrome. I'm a tech from the point of I've got to have everything in there,
Yeah.
and that's what makes well. I guess both of us are in the photocopy syndrome. I mean,
Yes.
we act like a damn machine, and we say, "Oh,
That's
we
right.
can take a photocopy and we can just put it on the canvas." And say,
Right.
"Well, next time, take it down to Staples and then get it copied, and then the machine did it. Now you got to do something different than that
Yeah.
machine because
Yeah.
it's gonna come out different." And the paintings behind me are similar to that. The flowers that I've got on the wall, they are basically a copy of a photo reference. And I am now gone through, and here's somebody who does this. If somebody out there does this, this is how I followed, and probably Marianne followed the same steps. You can tell me, but you come in and you start copying a photo. You copy
Yeah.
everything in the photo, and the vase that's behind me with the flowers. It's got to a point with me. I will copy part of it, and then I've come in and added or subtracted or modified other parts of it.
Mhm.
So the flowers are pretty much where I made it, and then the vase is something I copied. So it's not a bad thing to copy, but it's as far as an artist goes, they know what not to and they know what to. And when
Yeah.
you get to that point where you know not to and what to, now you become a more of an artist. But if you're just doing it just to do it and just get it on there, and then all of my paintings that I've actually photocopied, basically put on canvas, they never turned it as good as the photo.
Yeah.
Not one of them turned out to be as good as the photo itself. So
Yeah.
photo is emitting something that I can't get. So I started taking out like you did. You take a flower and you say, okay, let's put it in a certain. If the canvas is only so size, so let's zoom in on the flower versus taking it from the photo, which is way zoomed out or
Yeah.
way out there. Let's zoom it in. In fact, I'll bring up one right now. It's called The Dance.
Oh,
And
yes, the
and
Dahlia. Yeah.
this is a beautiful piece.
Oh, thank you.
You've taken it into so many arenas as far as the where you placed it, how much you went in on it, and then how everything gridded. I mean, the rule of thirds pretty much
Yeah.
rolls on this one.
Yeah.
This is very well. Tell us a little bit more about it.
So that one is actually a cafe au lait dahlia from my garden, and that's an iPhone shot. And the reason I really like that one is because of the warm and the cool on it. So you can see on the one side, it's got the much more warm tones to it, sort of like
Mhm.
tans and things like that. Whereas on the other side, it's got these really nice, cool purplish highlights that
Right.
are on the tips of the petals. And I really liked that. I love the play because I think one of the most beautiful things about painting flowers is the subtlety of it.
Mm.
Like you can make a slight tonal adjustment, you can make it move from warm to cool, and it
Mhm.
adds such depth to the flower without
Mm.
removing any of the airiness. Like if you add too much contrast to flowers, they can feel fake and graphic, but if you
Right.
just play with that subtlety a little bit, and that was a lot of fun for me for this one. And because that one's acrylic, it took a couple layers.
Mhm.
So I think if I had to peg a working time on that one, it would probably be about probably 35 to 40 hours, I would say. It's pretty big. I think it's
It's a
36 by
36 by
48.
48. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it's a big one. So it took a while. And the thing about working with acrylic, because I work in both acrylic and oil, is that that first layer is always going to be streaky and look
Yeah.
terrible. There's no way around it. And
Mhm.
that's actually what I coach artists through when because I do have a course called Painting Flowers in Acrylic. And one of the things I really warn people about is there's really no way to get this first layer looking good because the first
I
layer
agree.
with acrylic dries so fast, dries
Mhm.
so transparent, dries so streaky, and so you have to think in layers and you sort of have to build it up. I find specifically with the darks in particular with acrylic,
Mhm.
they look so awful
Right.
on the first pass.
Dark, dark.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. On this one, then, because I want to get into the acrylics too, because
Mm.
I'm a big acrylic fan. Um, that did you paint the you keep talking about the color part of it. What did you change the petals, what you had in the video?
No,
As far as the actual flower itself, you kept
nothing.
everything the way it was and you let the color speak as far as how it would go.
That's right. I didn't have to do anything. The dahlia was just, oh my gosh, it was so pretty.
It is pretty. It
And
is
I
pretty.
actually send out that reference to anyone who wants it. So if anyone's watching this and is like, oh my gosh, I want that dahlia, you can actually like download it. I offer it for free because if you want to paint it, have at it. And so honestly, dahlias and a lot of flowers are rhythmic, like the way that they're built.
Mm-hmm.
So they're naturally very perfect the way that they're formed. Peonies, other
Mm-hmm.
flowers like that are softer, looser, but dahlias are very structured. So I didn't have to do anything with that. It's exactly as my reference photo shows.
So the detail is pretty much, as from a sketch standpoint, pretty much static. It's the
Yeah.
color that really defines where it is. And I'm just amazed because I'm an acrylic painter. I'm not necessarily, I shouldn't say I'm an acrylic painter. I'm betwixt and between at times between acrylic and oils. I rather
Yeah.
do oils and I
Yeah.
do oils and I'm trying to get good at them, but I've done the painting back here in the black and white, that was acrylic.
Hey,
So
there you go. Looks
there
great.
are well, there are times to do acrylic. I've not seen an artist such as yourself on this particular one painted in such a way that it is almost oil based because you have the tones so well done. It blows me away
Oh, thank you.
that you did that, and it's like, okay, even after this podcast, or we'll do some more episodes. How the hell did you do
All right.
that?
Well, and that's why I did a YouTube channel. So like you can see the whole thing.
Okay,
Yeah,
good,
yeah. So that
good.
painting has a full YouTube tutorial. So you can actually watch the whole process and you can see how terrible it looks in the first pass because it genuinely did. Like
Yeah,
that's not me being faux like humble here. That's
right.
it
No,
looked bad.
reality sets in, right?
It looks so bad.
I got
And
it.
that's what I think with acrylic. So, yes, I work in both oil and acrylic. What I love about, like, and if you were to ask me to choose one, I would probably lean more towards oil.
Hmm.
One of the reasons I still do paintings in acrylic is oftentimes because of the teaching component, because that's actually a lot of my practice is relaying what it is that I'm doing to other people through my YouTube channel typically. And I
Hmm.
find that acrylic has a lower barrier to entry simply
Hmm.
because it's so easy to clean up. You
Right,
don't need any special solvents. There's a lot less concerns from like a toxicity standpoint. You
right.
can easily find acrylic. It's like it's so easy to get started with acrylic paint versus oil. And because it dries so quickly, it is beginner friendly. But then it also dries so quickly.
Exactly,
And
exactly.
so I haven't tried the Golden Open, but I've heard great things about that
Hmm.
line. It is something I would be interested in trying in the future. For now, I just use standard Liquitex Professional. I do always go with the artist brand. That's like a non-negotiable for me. I don't use the student grades. But I've got some here.
Yeah, let's see.
This is just what I use for
Okay.
like just your standard Liquitex. And I honestly find these bottles, I think this for your audience, emerging artists, it can be really intimidating to spend a fortune on a bottle this size.
Hmm.
It lasts forever because you don't need much, right? Like it's like oil
Right.
paint, you don't need much. I think when I was painting that massive 36 by 48, like I didn't even use half of the paint in those tubes. So a little bit goes a long way.
That's what I'm finding out. I've talked to Bill Inman that I've interviewed before, and he's talking about he goes out and he buys his paint beginning of the year or something like that, and he spends a certain amount of money, and he says, you say that quite frankly, it's not a lot of money. I think I'll just if he I'm just going to tell him we'll tell you guys what it was. It was about I think he spends about $1,000 on paints, but he says they last the full year.
Oh yeah.
It's like I don't use the whole tube. I mean, sometimes it just lasts and lasts and lasts, and it depends upon sometimes what color it is. White will always
Yeah.
go a little bit faster than
Yeah,
others, but
totally.
it's just but still overall, it's a low price to spend when you are selling art and you've got a lot of art to sell, and you can do a lot of art with it, with that amount of paint. So so you're kind of validating his story too,
100%.
that it works.
Oh
So you
yeah.
should go out there. There is another painting I'm going to bring up, and it's called Rhapsody in Blue.
Oh, the mountain one. I actually have that one
Yes.
here. Yeah.
And this is one that I've noticed on your site, and this blew me away. It's a 20 by 40 oil on canvas. You did it last year, Barrier Lake in Alberta. And when I looked at it, not the second time, the first time, I said, "That's a photo."
Oh, thank you.
And I had to hit it just to get it up on the screen to kind of say, okay, where's the brush strokes? you know, and
Well, they're
and
there.
I found them. I said, no, that isn't a photo. But this is where I go back on the color chart and the color wheel as far as Munsell especially, and
Yeah.
additive colors versus subtractive. When you look at them on monitor, this particular one, this piece is brought together by the color because there's a lot of blue in it all the way through.
Oh yeah.
But it is, again, what I'm finding a high value that a lot of artists aren't saying, that I keep coming across, and I'm going to wait till somebody tells me, no, that's not that important, is saturation.
Yes.
You have brought this whole piece together. I can see the whole thing saturated in the right balance.
Oh, thank you.
Everything
I
in it
appreciate
is
that.
just, no, I mean, you have and the sauce that with the train too, because the saturation is how much a color is somewhat dulled based
That's
upon it
right.
is not right out of the bottle. It is
Right.
dulled down because everything you see basically is in life, and in on these photos, they're all the real life is dulled down. All these
Yeah.
paintings, I look at a composition from a point of not where everything's placed, but how everything comes together when you put paint on it. And the only
Mhm.
way to put paint on it to where it comes together is not to have any paint brighter than the other unless it's needed as a focal point.
Mm.
Everything else kind of shades in on itself. And I interviewed a lady called Diane Mize, who's out of Georgia, and she calls this a mother color. She says you
I
you
like that.
find the mother color, and then you make sure that every piece of brushstroke has part of that mother color in it.
Oh, that's
And
a cool idea. I
that
love that.
that makes
Yeah.
everything seem that it is somewhat together and somewhat
Yeah.
connected. And I see that one step further, because this was several years ago when she taught me this. I see that as a saturation color. If
Mm.
you saturate your colors all to the right level, they all seem to be correct, then it brings every part of that painting as one. The whole thing works as a composition. Where so many painters out there now, you look at the paintings and something stands out that, which sometimes I call noise, and sometimes it's considered the focal point, and it stands out too much. It's too
Mm.
bright. It's too loud. It's too heavy,
Yeah.
and you got to get that back in order for everything else to stand out. So especially in landscapes, this is a
Yeah.
beautiful landscape.
Thank
and,
you.
and and mainly it is because I think it is because of your color. You've kept that value tone all the way throughout everything that you painted in it, and it's I don't I don't think I could do that. I mean, it's
Oh,
just,
I'm sure you could, but honestly, like I said, or like we discussed earlier, I made mistakes in that painting where, I tried to make the trees on the. I thought that I'm trying to. So if you see me looking over there, it's because the
yeah, no,
painting
I
is
get you.
actually still here with me. But so the trees on the left side, when I first started adding them in, I made them slightly greener and a bit more saturated than what the
Mm,
photo was presenting to me.
hmm.
Because I thought, oh, like you said, this is all shades in blue, which is why I named it
Right.
that. And I was like, okay, this could be a little boring if maybe I'll zhuzh it up a bit with a bit more saturation. And so I added a bit more green tones to the spruces that were on the left side. And then as the painting continued, I was like, that was the wrong move. And so the trees I added in on the right were a little bit colder, more blue, more true to what the original reference photo was showing me. And then I looked at them, I was like, I think the answer lies somewhere in the middle. So I
Mm,
wound up that whole line of spruces that you can see in front of the snow, in front of the trees that have that extra line of snow, they were fussed over. And so I think what you're describing, where for me, what I when I feel like something is off in a painting, but I'm not really sure what it is, I
right.
actually call that a sticky spot
Mm,
because there's an area of the painting that's actually like my eyes are catching on it.
hmm.
And the older and more experienced I get, the quicker I'm able to identify what those sticky spots
Right.
are.
Right.
And I think that honestly comes with time and experience.
Right.
But often when I'm working with emerging artists, they'll say, oh, I don't like this, or something's bothering me. It's too whatever.
Right.
It's too bright, it's too dark, it's too
Mhm.
saturated, it's too
Mhm.
muted. And what they're actually doing, and they don't even know it, is that they're diagnosing.
Right. I want to go to one more of Mary Ann's before we go out of here.
Sure.
And I'm going to bring up the Judy Garland of the 2021
Oh,
12 by
yeah.
12. This is an oil on canvas. This is a beautiful piece when she's talking about, when she started talking about Elizabeth Crimson, the red candy and everything. I said, okay, this is a good one.
Yeah.
So I say, this is one of yours in oils. And this is the one you kind of said was petal by petal. Is that correct?
Yep. That
And
is correct. And there's actually a YouTube video of this one too, if people want to see. It was filmed 4 years ago, so the quality isn't as good as my new YouTube video, so don't judge me
fine.
on the quality. But yeah, this one was petal by petal that I built it.
This is I had contact with a lady not too long ago, Tina Alvarez, and she worked with Richard Smid,
Oh,
and
love Richard.
she gave me a little bit of a lesson of doing a boat in the water. And I said, okay. She sent me the reference photo, and I said, okay, I'll do the boat. She said, well, just do start with the back of the boat, and don't go anywhere further until that's done. And I
Oh,
went through started with the back, and it had to be completely finished. And then I went to the little bit of the middle part, hardly even the middle. It just kept creeping up to the front. And it was like, and it came out really good. So it
yeah,
was like when you said pedal to pedal, I mean,
yeah,
yeah, it's like, okay, that's a unique way of doing it too.
yeah,
But it really does to me what that process did to me, and I'm sure it probably did. It does instill something in you that you can jump off and go somewhere else. But if you stick with it and stay, like I
yeah,
was talking with Stacy, I mean the same thing. You don't lose control of where
yeah,
you're at, and stick with the narrative all the way through. That pedal to pedal scenario would work too. It would
yeah.
work very well.
And I love that one because it really taught me a lot about red. Um, and in that example I used earlier, like how do you lighten red?
Mm-hmm.
And so in
Mm-hmm.
this one, with it being a split primary, I used I was either a quinacridone magenta or alizarin crimson to
Mm,
create the lighter, cooler reds in certain parts of that. And I think one of the reasons I really like going petal to petal with oil flowers. Now with acrylic flowers, I kind of have to do one first pass and then
right.
come back. But I think one of the reasons I like doing it petal to petal, piece by piece with oil is because you really kind of get lost in the softness of it, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. Like
Yes, it does.
it's just like the blending is so
Mm-hmm.
gentle
Mm-hmm.
and it feels like I kind of just want to work in all of those tones, the
Mm-hmm.
warms, the cools. I love to use purple for shadows and flowers just
Mm-hmm.
because I find like it's so gentle. And so I find that when I'm locked in on a petal, it helps if I can get those warm and cool, subtle rippling effects in at the same sitting, as opposed to, getting those, say, working from the shadows first and blocking in the cools and then doing
Right.
that throughout the whole petal, throughout the whole
Right.
flower, and then coming back. It just feels right in that moment. And again, I'm not sure if there's a reason for this, and I wish I could offer something more scientific, but intuitively, it just feels like the right thing to just stay on the pedal and keep it soft and airy before I move on to the next one.
Well, I will tell you something. Based upon this painting, you actually look like you take what you've done with that one petal and you carry it to the next petal.
Yeah.
And then you carry it to the next petal, and then
Yeah.
you carry it to the next petal,
Yeah.
and then it's an accumulation of petals that have an accumulation of the same thing from the first petal.
Yeah.
So it's like I can see how that you don't lose that effect.
Yeah.
You just, like you say, it just gently, it actually looks like it does gently work its way through petal. It does look like a painting that is done petal to petal versus
Yeah.
one that is just done on first.
Yeah.
So
Like layer, like, yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So that is absolutely fascinating. And Marianne, we appreciate you coming on board. This was a really good talk.
Oh, thank you
I
so
love the tech
much.
talk. I mean, it was great.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like this is the stuff that people need to know. It's a lot to know. It's a lot to do. It's
It's
not
so
it's
much.
it is so much, but it can
Yeah.
be done with help of people like Marianne, and it can be done with others that I've interviewed and even others that I'm about to interview. So please just stay with it. Don't give up on it. Everybody
Yeah.
makes mistakes, and
Oh,
everybody
yeah.
got to start somewhere in order to get where they're at.
Yes, absolutely. And that's kind of my whole thing too, is that everyone has to start somewhere. And it's not my job to like try and overwhelm people with sheer amount of knowledge. My job is to try and figure out how I can best support them. And in teaching, we have something called the zone of proximal development, which is that you don't want to overwhelm kids by teaching them calculus in grade one.
Mhm.
If this is where their current area of knowledge is, then you teach them here.
Mhm.
Once their area of knowledge is here, then you can bring them here.
Mhm.
And I think that's kind of what I aim to do in my own practice, is trying to help meet people where they're at and support them so that they can move to the next ring. So,
And that's the kind of artists we need out there teaching us. I mean, not the ones that are just wanting to make the money and just throw it out there quickly. No, we want the ones who can actually help us through this process and getting us to where we want to be and enjoy painting, which is what it is. And your painting has been just wonderful to enjoy.
oh, thank you so much. I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it. It's
I
honestly, it's been
appreciate
a
you.
treat.
Thank you very much, Marianne. And this is
Thank
Phil
you.
McNally with Artist to Artist. And we had Marianne on, and we're going to have more people on. And you take care, and we'll be talking at you. Thank you very much.